Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Hi, Pastor Gene with you this evening, or as you can see, it's afternoon. I'm taping this from the office, and I'll explain a little bit later one of the reasons why I'm doing this. Let's read from Luke 24, starting with the 44th verse. Then Jesus said to them, his disciples, "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled." Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. You know, though Christ is risen almost 2,000 years ago, and of course we celebrated Easter Sunday yesterday, celebrating that blessed event when Christ was risen. I told you that we were going to keep Jesus in the tomb for a little bit longer, that we were going to go back to that Easter Saturday, the day of rest and quiet. And the purpose was to think about what the disciples had thought and felt on that day about Jesus, about God, and about themselves as they were locked up in that upper room, afraid for their lives from the Jews and the Romans. Here were the facts. Jesus was dead. Dead like any other human, and he lay buried in a tomb. That brought up the possibility that Jesus was a fraud, a well-meaning fraud, a lovable and loving fraud, but a fraud nonetheless. His claims of being the Messiah were snuffed out brutally by the oppressive Roman government. How could they, and how could we comprehend that the Son of God would die like any other human being? That could not be possible, could it? Their thoughts on God the Father, that certainly God's world of love, peace, and healing was crushed. Does that mean that the powerful Roman emperor was more powerful than God? That would douse any future hope of God's kingdom coming to this world. Or maybe this world is so brutal, so violent, so mired in sin, that God, the owner of the vineyard, whose son was killed by the tenants, he just picked up and went elsewhere to plant his vineyard. And what about themselves? They had followed Jesus for 3 years. For what? What was the end? What was the purpose? They dropped everything, and now their lives were in danger. What were they to do? Maybe they would be the next to suffer like Jesus did. Then the unthinkable happened. Unprecedented, unexpected. Jesus is risen. At first glance, it makes this better. And I think it does in the long run. That indeed, this Jesus was and is the Son of God, the Messiah, the one that everybody had been waiting for. that God the Father was faithful to his Son, that had accepted his Son, which means that God was faithful to them, to us, and that he accepts them and us. But just a peek back into the tomb on Saturday brings back memories of Thursday and Friday, even though that tomb is empty. The flashback is vivid of Jesus' suffering, of all of the disciples abandoning him, betraying him. And our thoughts are, their thoughts may have been, why would the Son of God, Jesus the Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, their friend, why would he have to go through all this? Then would come the realization that he did it for us, for his love of us. But he also did it because of us. Yes, because because we are so filled with sin, with hate, with violence, with judgment, that the only way we could be cut loose from that bondage is for Jesus, our brother, to take our place on that cross. What does that feel like? That it was our sin that caused Jesus to suffer. We'll look at those feelings that may be in us, and maybe look at some reasons why Jesus would do this. On Wednesday, you ask, what about Tuesday? Well, in an email from Bishop Clements, he told us, not as our boss, church council is the boss. Remember that. You, the congregation, and the church council are the boss. But the bishop is the pastor of the pastors, and the pastor of all the churches. He looks out for our well-being. And he said, pastors, you look tired when we met on Zoom. You need a day of rest. So I'm leaving the office today here at about 2, going home, having the rest of the day as rest, and also tomorrow as a day of rest. I am going to meet with you live tomorrow evening at 8:30. I'm not going to prepare. That takes an hour or 2 or more for preparation, for study. But I am just going to visit with you, and we'll pray with you. Also, in the email from the bishop, he left a sermon for us pastors, so we would not have to prepare a sermon this coming Sunday. So we will lead worship live, and I encourage you maybe to come in and get a ELW hymnal to follow along. But we'll see if I can figure out the technology to put the bishop's sermon up. The sermon on the second Sunday in Easter. The sermon about the disciples and Thomas. So, God bless. It was great to be with you all yesterday. It was so special. It was uplifting. I'm glad we did this together. And join me tomorrow at 8:30 just for a little conversation and prayer. The Lord be with you all.